There is nothing more confusing than the bloody history of tire manufacturing. And listen, we've sold tires before. I've sold more tires, big ones and little ones, new ones and old ones, brands that you know and brands that you don't. I have tires coming out of my ears in terms of the amount of information that I have gotten accustomed to from learning about that most people just don't want to share. Why? Because that would mean that they would lose their edge on why you would overspend for a certain tire, or why buying some other tires can be one of the worst decisions you can make for your car. Now, good news, we're here at Martini Works, where that is not going to be how we're going to help you buy the right tires for your car. Instead, we're going to tell you everything that you need to know about tires in the video that we're kind of dubbing the Tire Iceberg Explained. I'm Alex. Welcome to Martini Works, where we help people modify their cars the right way. And to do that, we feel like it's important for you to understand as much of this information as you would like. And if you are a tire expert, we want your opinion on everything we talked about in the comments below. If you're looking for a hell yeah moment this tax season, get only the tires we'd recommend over at martiniworks.com and get your wheels and tires packaged by people who actually care about the community. Also, stick around to the end where we dive into the biggest problem coming to tire manufacturing, or I'm going to tell your mother where you keep that sock. So what is the tire iceberg? Well, what I would say is that it's the amount of information that's shared about tire production. That's the thing above the waterline. And then there's the messy divorce paperwork that's hiding underneath the waterline. So to start, let's talk about actually who owns who. You might already know that General Tire is owned by Continental Tire. General is the more affordable tire to their lineup and makes mostly SUV and truck tires. And they do make the G-Max RS, but many of their tires are made in the same factory and go through very similar production processes, but they're not identical, just similar. Cooper is owned by Goodyear after spending $2.8 billion in 2021, and as of 2021, they were the 5th largest North American tire manufacturer. In 2005, Toyo decided to launch Nitto Tire to be a US spin-off brand to focus on high-performance tires and truck tires with only 25 employees and a $7 million investment, which kind of does feel a little bit backwards now because 20 years later, Toyo is also making high-performance tires for cars and trucks, but it's like Scion all over again. Michelin owns Uniroyal and BF Goodrich, along with some other brands for global resale. Uniroyal actually had a factory in my hometown in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which was really cool until it got shut down. Bridgestone owns Nokian, Dayton, Firestone, and Achilles, and what you're left with is nearly every tire humanly possible being sold by these 5 companies, which is kind of wild, right? But the first assumption is that because Uniroyal is under Michelin or General is under Continental, that they're the same tire and you can save money by just buying that brand. And unfortunately, they're not. General Tire and Continental can even come made in the same factory, but it doesn't mean that they're the same. Like ingredients to bake a cake, you won't make the same as a professional. They have different compounds, ply application, and even the tooling they use are different. And that's what brings up or down the cost of a tire, along with warranties. That's how you derive sometimes a different tire quality. The biggest cost to a tire company is number 1, the factory itself, number 2, the tooling and support materials like water for steam, and number 3, the material itself like the rubber tree and the chemicals that it uses. So no, first things first, not all tires within the umbrella of a brand are the same. But what about China? China. I can't even do it right. Similar to the KTM rush of Hyundai Elantras and Veloster Ns coming to the United States, in the early 2000s, Chinese companies saw the insane amount of opportunity if they could lock in a foothold of tire production within America. In 2000, 15 million tires from China came through the ports. In 2008, it was 46 million tires. And as of 2023, now it's only 25.6 million tires. Now, before we get into this, and this is very important, you gotta listen to everything I say. China does not automatically equal bad. In September of 1994, US Goodyear formed a joint venture with Dalian Rubber in China. In 1995, Michelin established Shenyang Michelin Co. in China. In March of 1996, Bridgestone teamed up with Mitsui & Co. and started Shenyang Santai. Most of these are still in production today. And guess where they are? They're in China. But before I get clipped for saying that so people feel better about buying non-branded tires from Alibaba, China does not equal Alibaba. These tire manufacturers who go in to do tire production in China are not being held to the China-originated business practices. They're led by home office business practices, which mean a Michelin-branded tire made in France or the US is no different than the one made in China. These factories are typically branded and owned by the factory and the tire company, not the other way around. These factories, for instance, are typically Michelin owned or Conti owned, not someone else's factory in China that Michelin or Conti just happens to get their tires from. And that's a very important distinction. More often than not, China manufacturing is actually for China distribution. For instance, EVs and the BYD brand are huge in China. So Michelin has a ton of China production built around those EV tires, guess where? In China. But don't confuse that information. You can cherry pick it to try and start an argument and say that China tires are just rebranded Michelins or Contis or Falcons or Yokohamas, but you would be wrong. And everyone would point and laugh at you and call you silly. Don't do that. You'd be wrong. China manufacturing itself isn't bad, but copycats are bad, and you will get sued into oblivion if you touch a design that's owned by one of the big five. Michelin does not play around. They'll do it globally too. They sue somebody like every 2 weeks. So what's bad about non-branded tires, aka China tires, aka that brand you've never heard of before, found on a 160,000-mile bug-eye you just bought? Well, the rise of global manufacturing has caused a race to what we would call the bottom of the barrel, which is probably one of the most controversial parts of this video. For every Continental and Michelin and Toyo and Yokohama, there's now a Linglong and Triangle and Saloon and Goodride and Landsail, companies that started in China and have continued production of what seems to be an endless shell of oddly named tires that come at a fraction of the cost of what we would know as name brand in the US. And it got so bad that the government had to get involved in 2019 for truck and bus tires being imported from China, initiating what we would call an anti-dump duty. What is an anti-dump duty? Anti-dumping is when something like a tire is taxed because the tire being imported is being sold so low at a cost it would be considered unfair for everyone else. Dumping implies that it's a specific intention and that the duty compensates for the difference between the export price and the product's normal value. But they didn't impact passenger car tires, which has led to brands selling 18-inch tires right now for $70 a tire, which is a huge issue. But what's the problem with that for us? Well, unless you're using these tires to simply shred at a drift event, and sometimes even then, these tires are really only good for the most standard application ever. Standard weather, dry ground, nothing overly aggressive in stopping and going, and you might be okay. QA is sometimes just but that's okay. They work okay-ish in the wet, but they rarely do both together. Why? Because you're buying cheap tires. And while that's okay, we've seen so many people buy these tires, claiming that they're as good as an objectively better tire. But the difference is that neither of these tires were used under stress applications, which is huge. People say that they were both the same, but they both did the same typical 55 and a 65 behavior. Tires are rarely noticed under normal driving. That's why unsuspecting tires are touted as fantastic. And while we don't think money grows on trees here at Martini Works, we do want folks to be smart about what tires they use for their build. For every stretch tire that you would need for a car show build, there's still a tire that can do it well on a budget. For every performance tire for an autocross day, there's a tire that can do it well on a budget. For every winter tire, the statement remains. We want you to buy what's within your price point, but we also want you to be safe. And a lot of times these no-brand tires don't have the level of QA or just structural integrity that you think that they would do it. But why is it so hard to determine? Like, how can this be so impossible? Is Linglong actually garbage? Is Michelin overpriced? Why can Alex not grow any facial hair? Why is he yelling at me? This is the final point. The tire industry is a bit It's so aggravating to be an enthusiast and buy the right tire. The very tire will tell you is good. Someone else will say that they've had luck with it, and it has a lot to do with poor regulation. It's why massive companies can start a tire brand with absolutely zero experience with actual tire production, because they'll just white label it, and you can be the most dangerous tire on the road, and nobody really seems to give a shit. It's not fair to you guys and gals. There's nothing out there telling you the clear difference in premium tires and trash ones. Speed ratings and wear should be standardized, but it isn't. Even the concept of like tread wear ratings and all that sort of stuff is absolutely mind-boggling. There's different regulations for Europe, America, Japan. The actual standard tire of being a 200 tread wear versus a 400 tread wear is complete baloney, because you can't even cross-reference them across a Conti versus a Michelin, and some brands, even like Nitto and Toyo, use different tire controls for different types of tires. So a 200 tread wear on an NT01 is not the same on an NT555G2. It doesn't make any sense. It's so easy to figure out why people lose their goddamn marbles about tires. And it's probably why there's so much content out there of people trying to tell you what tires to buy. And it probably is also why so many tire companies pay people like us an absolute ton of money to promote their tires so that you can just believe me as my neck veins come out and my face turns pink. This video is not sponsored by jack shit. This is just a natural pain point we have seen so often when people send us emails when they're looking to package tires with their wheels. So here's what we recommend to help you on your tire buying journey, transparently. Like I said, no one paid us to say this, and this is exclusively based on our own near decade of experience of trying good tires and trying tires. If you're buying a tire just so you can drive on new wheels, ask yourself what the weather is like where you live. If you're driving in rain and sun, but you're never underneath 40 degrees or near freezing and you're on a budget, snag some Nexen SU1s, some Toyo Extendas, or Nitto Neogens. If you're not on a budget, Continental DWS06, Michelin Pilot Sport AS4, or Yokohama Advanced Sport AS Pluses. If you're buying a tire for spirited track driving and you daily it as well, and it rains sometimes but it's never under 40, stick to the Yokohama Advan Apex, Continental ECS02, Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, or Pirelli P0. If you need a budget tire, then go with the Kenda KR20A or General G-Max RS, are both solid. If you're buying a tire that you want to decimate all after you put 100 grand into the hood of your S2000 and you don't mind living on rainy days on Legendary, and you're on a budget, the Falcon Azenas RT615K+, the BFG Sport Comp 2, and Firestone Indy 500s are awesome. If you're not on a budget, the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 and Hankook RS4s. Bonus points for the Nitto NT555G2, Toyo R888R, and NT01 for just simply being very good looking tires. And that, my friends, is why buying tires is so damn hard. It doesn't have to do with the fact that you have tires coming out of the ears in terms of new brands popping up every single day, but now you have companies white labeling more tires from China and different places because they just want to make more money. And what you're left with is people trying to understand what is actually a good tire versus what is a tire. The number one tip I could possibly recommend to you, number one, is to use the website and ask us questions. We gain nothing by hiding the truth on the tires. That's why we don't sell everyone. We only sell the ones that we have the most experience with. Number two, use that spider graph that you'll see on new tire pages that are coming out on Martini Works. The spider graph is the nicest thing I've ever used, just as an enthusiast. It outlines specific performance elements of a tire and how well it does in those elements. Is it still subjective? Absolutely, but you will generally notice that the more expensive of a tire you get, the more that spider graph is covered on all 5 points. Now, that does not mean that every tire is fantastic, but we're just trying to give you a couple tips and tricks. And if there's a tire that you swear by, that you've actually used, that you've actually put to the limit, whether it was on a budget or not, and you've had good experiences with it, drop it in the comments below, because I would love to learn more about tires that you may have enjoyed because we may have missed one. But I'm Alex Martini. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what we should talk about next transparently, and I promise I will try to breathe more in between my paragraphs. We'll talk to you guys later. Have that hell yeah moment at martiniworks.com. I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye.